Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you might be in this fine world. You are listening to the Startup Selling Show, talking sales with Scott Sambucci. That's me. Today's episode is a guest episode, and today's guest is Jen Spencer. Many of you out there in the startup world probably have either seen Jen speak, you've listened to one of her interviews on a podcast, you've probably read something that she's written. Jen is just a phenomenal person altogether, and she is now the CEO of SmartBug Media. SmartBug is a leading intelligent inbound marketing agency. They work both with B2B and B2C e-commerce businesses to help them obviously grow revenue by generating leads and scaling revenue operations and building market awareness. I've known Jen for many years. I met her probably 7-8 years ago at a conference wherein she was leading the marketing efforts at a company called Allbound. We stayed in touch over the years. She actually joined us as a podcast guest years ago when she was at Allbound. And then since then, we stayed in touch as she's moved over to SmartBug. We've had her come as a guest expert in some of our client events that we run in San Francisco. She's come to talk to our group a couple different times. And now we've had her here on the podcast again. So I'm really excited to have her here and talk about the expertise that she has, especially working with B2B tech startups and helping them expand their marketing funnel, think through marketing strategies, and of course, getting leads into the top of their sales funnel. A couple of the key topics that we talked about, which I think you should really be listening for, is number one, she mentioned that most companies should wait until they have at least $3 to $5 million in revenue before they hire a marketing agency. Which when I heard that, I was like, wow, I mean, they are a marketing agency, and she's actually telling people you need to wait till you get to 3 to 5 million before you even hire somebody like us at SmartBug. More importantly, she gave all the reasons why. She explained all the reasons why. So you want to listen to that part of the conversation as we kicked off our chat today. Secondly, we talked about the importance of having sales-minded marketing people or marketing-minded salespeople in your organization, especially as an early stage company, because of course, as an early stage company, you don't have the luxury of hiring big marketing teams and big sales teams and having really specific roles and responsibilities. You need people that can do a little bit of everything, especially as you're getting into those first customers, that first $1 million in revenue. And so there really are a lot of hybrid roles that need to be able to be executed on, where the salesperson might be putting together some marketing collateral or putting together content that's useful, or marketing people that might be needed, necessary to be doing some sales related activity. And so she talked through quite a bit of that. And then a couple of the other things that we talked about specifically were how an early stage company, even if it's a small team, what can you do as a founder if you're not going to hire a marketing agency, if you're not going to go spend thousands of dollars every month, and you still need to produce content to get people onto your website, to get people to convert, to get people to engage in a conversation with you. What can you do with limited time and resources? She gave some really specific tactical tips on that. And finally, kind of wrapped up with a couple of ideas and signals that when you start reaching that $3 to $5 million range, what are some signals that you'll look for to say, okay, now we've gotten out of the garage, we've gotten past $1 million, we're making that big push up to 3 to 5 million. These are a couple of things we should be looking for. And when we see these signals, it would be time for us to engage in a marketing firm to work with a company like SmartBug Media. So all kinds of great tactical tips when it comes to your marketing strategy and how it overlays with your sales strategy. And for some of you, maybe probably saved you a couple $1,000s a month, because if you're an early stage company and you're hiring and working with a marketing agency right now and finding that maybe it's not working very well, there's a really specific reason why, and maybe why it'd be better to take that budget that you're allocating to marketing and allocate it somewhere else. So that's my conversation with Jen Spencer. Super stoked to have her here back on the show. Good to see her again. I can't wait to have her come and talk to our group again in one of our future live events. So that's it for now. Let's head over to my conversation with Jen Spencer. Jen Spencer, welcome to the Startup Selling Show. Good to see you.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here. Glad to be back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. It's good to see you in person. I haven't seen you. I mean, we're on Zoom, but I see you in person. And the last time I think I actually saw you in person is when you had come to San Francisco and done a couple of talks at some of our live events, which are always well received by our clients. So it's good to see you again. Things have changed for you personally and professionally over the last 12 months or so.
Yeah.
You're now the CEO of SmartBug Media, which is pretty cool to see. I'm sure that's pretty exciting for you.
Yes, thank you. It is. It's been a wild ride, but it's a great place to call home. I've always loved SmartBug, so I feel like I'm in the perfect role right now.
Yeah. What I'm just curious real quick before we get into the guts of some of our content. Maybe this catch you a little off guard, but was there anything that was surprising about moving into the CEO role? I know you had a transition plan. It wasn't like
Mhm.
one day you showed up and like, oh, this is now your job.
Yeah.
Like you had mentioned
Yeah.
to me that you had been kind of talking through this with Ryan, the original founder, but even after all that prep, was there like one
Mhm.
thing surprising good or not so good as you stepped in? You're like,
Yeah.
oh, whoa.
Yeah, one of the things, this is going to sound silly that it was surprising, but it was the recognition that I'm in charge. So,
Hmm.
when you've got executives like sitting in a meeting and we're having a discussion and everyone shares their input and then ultimately someone has to make the call, that realization of, oh, shoot, that's me. It's my turn to speak.
Wow,
um,
everybody's really quiet right now.
yeah,
Oh
oh, that's
yeah, that's
me.
right.
Yeah.
It's my call now.
So although people who work with me know I'm pretty opinionated, I like to make my view known. So it should have come as no surprise to me that I would be the one in charge. But there is something that's a little bit jarring after being our chief revenue officer, even when I moved into a president role, when I was overseeing all operations. But when you think about major company initiatives, things that impact our culture, things that really impact our people, I, always provided input, but then there was somebody else. There was our CEO, our founder, who
Mm.
ultimately made that call. And so now for that to be me, I'm very well aware of the responsibility that I'm carrying. And it was something I guess I knew on paper, but until I was in that moment and feeling it, I underestimated how it would feel.
Well, I have no doubts that you're thriving in that role now. So
Thank you. I'm
it's exciting to
trying.
see you there. It's cool. I mean, I've seen you so much over the years as an expert in obviously in marketing. I've seen you speak at the inbound event that HubSpot runs. You all are obviously HubSpot certified. And recently there's a new platform that you just got certified on as
Yeah.
well, which
Yes.
I wasn't able to quite understand about that. Maybe you could talk about that
Yeah.
for a moment before
Yeah.
we get into
Happy
the rest.
to. Yeah. So that's Klaviyo. So we're a Master
Otherwise.
Elite Klaviyo partner. And we became a Klaviyo partner by way of an acquisition that took place with our organization last year. So we acquired an e-commerce direct to consumer kind of B2C Klaviyo partner called Worth e-commerce. They're now fully integrated into SmartBug. So part of the SmartBug brand, where we've largely been focused in the B2B space with some B2C through like inbound marketing efforts and supporting our clients on HubSpot. That organization that we brought on board services their clients through Klaviyo. And Klaviyo is an email and SMS marketing platform for retention marketing strategies, all in that direct to consumer space. So really different from the client base that we've been working with, but we found that our services and our approach were really complementary, and we wanted to collaborate, have the opportunity to collaborate with a different part of the market. And working with Klaviyo has been really exciting. They're growing quickly. They're working on some upmarket movements, which we had recently experienced with HubSpot. So culturally and strategically, just a really good fit for us. And we're excited about that relationship.
That's cool. I saw that on your LinkedIn profile where you had, I think you've added that as part of your description, being a Klaviyo
Yeah.
Master Elite partner. And I was curious to know what that was because I haven't run across it, but it makes sense since it's B2C and I'm in the B2B world.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Unless you start setting up a shop, you start shipping goods via Shopify, and you want to follow up with some cart abandonment and get people to convert on deals and opportunities, then you're probably not going to use Klaviyo. But
Right.
if you,
Well, once we
yeah,
start selling the sales quality of t-shirts,
there you go.
then of course we'll be looking to that.
There you go.
Bumper stickers, t-shirts, the whole
Yeah, all the goods.
all the goods. Well, listen, I mean, because I've known you over the years as being a B2B marketing sales go-to-market expert, I'd love to dial into that process a little bit and get your expertise on a couple of questions that always come up for us with our clients. They come up especially for early stage B2B tech
Mhm.
companies. And for definition, like when we think about early stage, I think there's kind of two categories of early stage. There's the early stage, which is kind of sub $1 million in annual recurring revenue, where there's real sales, real product, real customers, all those things, but very, very founder led.
Mhm.
And then the second category is kind of the post $1 million, where if a team has done well and they position themselves, they get to the $1 million ARR, then they get the Series A, a round of funding. And then that's where the true kind of scaling happens, where you're making the jumps from 1 to 3 and 3 to 10 million. So there's kind of those two categories. So I'd love to kind of ask you a couple of questions, and then maybe you can answer them thinking about maybe answer A, answer B based on where people are on that growth curve. And so the first question, which might be a little bit broad and we could dig a little deeper, which is, when an early stage company or growth stage company is thinking about sales and they're thinking about marketing, how should a founder be approaching sales and marketing, in the sense like, how do they work together? How shouldn't they work together? Or what are some of the mistakes that founders make when they're trying to consider sales, marketing, go-to-market operations, and effectively like you're just trying to get leads, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm pretty passionate about this stage of sales and marketing. And because I lived it, because I came out of organizations that were really small where we were building these things together. So I view sales and marketing really being one function as much as possible. Now, what I mean by that is that because you're at that stage, you're learning so much. Every demo request you go through, every sales meeting you have, every product meeting, every product sprint, every single milestone is critical. We make this joke in agency worlds, and I think it belongs really in like the SaaS world, and early stage SaaS world. Make this joke that a year at like an agency is like 5 years. Like, think about it like dog years, right?
That's exactly the phrase I was thinking of. I use that all the time. Startups are like operating on dog years.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So when you think like, if you're tired at the end of the week, you should be, because you probably did a month's worth of work in that week, right?
Yeah.
So when you're moving at that like much of a clip, like when it's that fast, you can't afford for there to be any echo chambers. You can't afford for there to be silos. So the organization, the revenue organization, well, the whole organization really should be as flat as possible, which means you're really focusing on having generalists in that organization, or people who can be those Swiss Army knife types of revenue professionals who can jump in and out of, if I'm a marketer, content development, but then also maybe systems implementation, revenue operations, CRM, marketing automation, management, but also know how to, quote, speak sales as well. Like, they get the sales language, and as scrappy as you can be and as nimble as you can be is what's really important at that stage. And so where I see folks make some mistakes is when they have their eyes, they look at like, well, what is a really successful company doing? And what kind of resources, what kind of talent do they have? And they start to try to think about like modeling themselves after that organization, not realizing that organization that they're like putting up on this pedestal probably went through something very scrappy, very rough around the edges in order to get to where they are now. And so as you grow, that what your needs are going to evolve just a little bit more.
That reminds me of a Steve Blank quote, which I'll probably botch, but the paraphrase is something like, startups are not smaller versions of big companies. Yeah. So if you're like, oh, well, we have the marketing department, we hired a director of marketing and marketing managers and marketing coordinators. It's like, yeah, you probably do that when you're at 30 million in revenue, but for now you got to like get leads.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the thing. So I guess like a more specific question around that, then, like sometimes I'll run across an early stage founder and they might be, kind of seed funded, 300K in revenue. So they've got some money, $1 million, $2 million in funding, and some revenue in the door. And what I hear sometimes from them is, well, we've just hired a marketing agency to help us with demand gen. And they're like, we're really going to focus on inbound, or we're really going to focus on branding. And I say, okay, cool. So what are you doing on the sales side? And it's like, well, I mean, we're going to figure that out once we get the leads, or like, I'm going to keep doing the selling, but we're really going to focus on the inbound side of things. And I'm curious to know what your reaction is to that situation.
Yeah. So I would probably not recommend hiring a marketing agency until you're somewhere between 3 or even up to 5 million in revenue.
Wow.
Or like as an ongoing, like if you're thinking you're just going to outsource all of your marketing to an agency. And the reason why is because, like I said, things change. I know, I've lived it. I've lived in like getting up from my desk back when I used to work in an office, getting up from my desk, walking to the kitchen to get a cup of coffee and overhearing a salesperson on a demo and having the VP of product in the kitchen also getting coffee and then getting an idea that sparked from that demo. And then all of a sudden the sprint changes on the like, it's just, I've lived it. Like, I just know how fast things move. So when I hear what, especially like when organizations come to us and they're really early stage and maybe they're like, it's not a money thing. It's not like they have tons of, they could have tons of funding and they've got the backing and the cash isn't an issue, let's say, but they still haven't figured out who they are, what they mean to who. It's really hard to put that outside of your organization when so much is changing. I think it can be done. Believe me, it can be done. We've seen it, but I think you'll be able to move faster with more agility if you're kind of handling it internally. And that's why what really works is to have a sales-minded marketers or marketing-minded salespeople. So when you're thinking about that sales team, it should be sales reps that, or let me say what it should not be. It should not be a sales rep who's come from an enterprise organization who's used to sitting in a cube somewhere, getting leads kind of thrown over the fence to that person. It needs to be someone who knows how to hunt and fish for themselves and also wants to build their own brand presence, wants to evangelize the company, wants to take content that the company might be creating and put their spin on it, wants to be part of the content creation process. So those early people, those people are wearing multiple hats. They have to be able to do a little bit of everything. But as we know, we can't scale an organization that way. And so then I think after you kind of get past that first $1 million, then it gives you a little bit of breathing room to say, now let's start to think about specializing. But still, you got to keep your finger on the pulse of how consistent have you been? How much has your value prop changed? Have your personas changed? When you look at your book of customers, how much consistency do you have there? And the more consistent things have been, the easier, I would say, the less risky it's going to be to start to specialize with marketing and sales. But if it's been a little bit tumultuous, which I don't want to make it sound like that's a problem, like that's very much reality for so many organizations, then it's probably best to keep those marketing and sales efforts as intertwined as possible and in-house. And that's where you can leverage certain folks for, like, we'll get brought in for some web development, integration creation, maybe some PR, maybe, some like one-off projects. But I was talking to a CEO of an early stage company just, a couple of weeks ago, and he was thinking about marketing the way he thinks about software development. So he wanted to do product development. And so he found an outsourced partner that he's literally just shifting all the development of the product over to this team. Okay, makes sense. But marketing is too dynamic for that, I think. And I don't think it's something that you can just kind of pass off to an organization. So if there's some agency out there that's saying, yeah, like we'll generate all the leads for you, I just don't know how valuable that's going to be. I'm not sure how sustainable that's going to be either. But there are a lot of organizations out there that do outsourced SDR services and call it marketing and call it demand gen. So we might be talking about two different things, Scott, honestly.
Well, I don't know if we are, because even that CEO that's outsourcing product, I think if you're doing outsourcing, maybe bug fixes or certain features that are kind of lockstep, and you're like, okay, we have a product roadmap, we just don't have capacity with our current engineers, we need to outsource some. I think that makes sense. But if you're in an early stage, it feels like to me like you'd want to own that product development process. Where every bug fix is, where everything that you tried that didn't work.
Yeah.
Have that internally. And I guess using that as an analogy for marketing, it's the same way. You outsource marketing. Like, I had a conversation just like you did a couple of weeks ago, I think it's like a week and a half ago, with a founder who has hired an agency, and he was pretty frustrated because he's like, we're 3 months in, they haven't done an effing thing. Like, I could have done in 2 weeks what has taken them 3 months. And he's just really frustrated with the process. You're probably thinking lead gen.
Well, I'm thinking, but do it, or what kept you from doing it? But
well,
no.
And that was where I wanted to circle back to, because I think, going back to the original case study where like $300K in revenue, $1 million or $2 million in funding, and then they spend a couple $1,000s a month or more to outsource the marketing, content development, those kinds of things. I think a founder would say, well, I need to get something off my plate, right?
Yeah.
I can't do all the marketing. I can't do all the selling. I can't manage all the team. So it seems like if I find a good agency, I could pay them a few $1,000. They can handle that piece so I can focus on other things. But it sounds what you're describing is like the danger is because the product and the market and the message and the personas and everything else is changing. By the time that marketing agency is producing content, they might be producing content for where the company was 3 months ago, not for where they are now.
Yeah. And I think it's like, you have to remember you get what you pay for. So I think that size company is better served ideally finding, someone who's more of a marketing generalist who can do a little bit of everything internally and hiring that headcount. And so if the idea is like, well, I don't have the cash to hire that headcount, or I don't want to take on that risk, thinking that, well, this agency for a couple $1,000s a month is going to be able to do it is a little bit misguided. Right. So you think about when you want an agency is when you already have that like core, like product market fit, what like kind of win looks like. And now you're looking at how do I start to scale it? How do I start to scale this? Right. So, and I'm just speaking from my own experience. Right.
Totally, yeah.
And I'm speaking from what I've seen, we've taken on clients. Like I was a client of SmartBug when I was running sales and marketing at Allbound, and it worked. But it worked because I was deeply ingrained in all things sales and marketing. And so I wasn't leaning on my agency to kind of like forge the path. It was quite a bit more like execution, because I was also the one on those calls every week saying, okay, this is the feedback we're getting. Here's what we're seeing. This is how I think we should make some adjustments, and then getting their input. So it was different. So where I see founders make some mistakes is when they go, well, I'm going to hire this really junior person that has a couple of years experience, and then I'm going to support that person with an agency. So you're probably not going to get the strategy you really need that you would get from someone that you hire internally. Yeah, maybe you're paying a little bit less, but they have ownership in the company, right? There's an equity play. They care about the outcome. They're going to work. They should work really hard for you, and they're going to be better suited to really serve that organization. Once you get like a couple of wins, like you start to go, all right, we know we can attract, and thinking in inbound terms, we attract X amount of traffic to our site. We convert X percent of that traffic into leads, X percent of those leads converted to opportunities. Once you've got that math, now you have something that's repeatable. And so now you can talk about scaling. I find that people tend to go after the talent and like looking at agencies before they've actually established those core benchmarks for like their revenue machine.
So they need to have the baseline metrics so that they know by how they're going to measure the success or not of those agencies. Just like a salesperson, right?
Exactly.
Like I've never done sales. I'm going to hire a salesperson and hope for the best. Versus as a founder, if you're like, look, I'm not spending a ton of time on sales, but if I spend 20 hours a week doing sales, some of that's prospecting, some of that's demos, some of that's customer success. Like if I spend an hour or two on LinkedIn, I can usually scare up a meeting or two. If I do an outbound email campaign, I can usually get a meeting or two. You sort of have some baseline so that when you hire an SDR, you go, well, this is what it's worked for me. I've got some basic scripts. I've got some outreach. This is kind of my conversion rate. It's not perfect, but I got something by which to measure you. You got to have the same thing, it sounds like, on the marketing side, because if you don't, then the agency can kind of like, well, we did our best. It's just that maybe your product isn't in demand in the marketplace or something.
Exactly. It could be so many things that could be askew. And so, you just think, before you throw money at it, before you add fuel to the fire, make sure the fire is in the right place.
Well, speaking of websites, because this is actually something I took notes on. So last fall, you all have your Intelligent Inbound podcast, which you ran some episodes in the fall, and you were interviewing a woman named Alex Wright, who was director of marketing at the time at Arcade. And something that you said in the interview was that the website, paraphrasing, so correct me if I don't get this right, your website should be the hardest working member of your sales and marketing team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about that then, because again, like my mindset is very sales oriented, because that's just my jam and that's my bias. So if I'm an early stage company, I'm thinking, and what we advise to founders, like you got to go out and sell, figure out how to get meetings, figure out how to get those meetings in the books, get them across the line, like sell first, market later. you're saying like your website should be the hardest working person on the team. So tell me more about that sort of philosophy or that perspective.
Yeah, I think I had this, like that kind of statement, that saying came to mind for me. I was sitting in the airport. I think I was in Vegas. I'm almost positive I was in Vegas. I was coming back from some networking, some an expo, some conference, and sitting there. My flight was delayed, and I get a ping on Slack, and it was somebody on my website at the time, like looking for who had some questions, and they were
This is like chat DM kind
it was
of
a
thing,
chat.
or?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a live chat. And the reason why is they had navigated to one part of the page. I had configured the chat bot to like pop up with questions that were specifically related to the content on that page to kind of spark the conversation. And because that was connected, that I'm using HubSpot CMS. I'm using their free chat tool on that CMS. It's integrated with Slack. So even though I'm at the airport, I'm getting it even like on my Apple Watch. Someone's on our site right now.
So you're watching a chatbot chat with somebody on your website.
Well, basically. At least I can see on Slack, like, someone's trying, there's something happening. There's something's going on, right?
Yeah.
So, if I'm $100 million company, maybe I'm like, you know what, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm like stuck in Vegas waiting for my flight. And like, I'm too tired. I want to be at the bar right now, but I'm not, right? I'm a revenue leader inside a very early stage scrappy startup where like time is money. So I open up my computer and I hop right on and boom, I end up securing a demo for the next morning. So, and then that turns into business for us. And so it's now you think about, well, what needed to happen in order for that booked meeting to occur? And when you're early stage, right? Like every book meeting, every demo, like that's critical, right? That's an at-bat that you need to have. Well, my website had content on it that spoke to that buyer persona that they were attracted to. They went to search for an answer to a problem. So that's one, right? That's pretty big, but that was critical. Without that content, there's no way that person would have made their way to me. Okay. The second piece is that I was using an intuitive content management system where they could interact with a chatbot, where they could actually interact directly with the organization. And I had configured the content on the chatbot to be relevant to the content that was on the page. So I took that extra step because I knew I don't have a team of inbound SDRs who have nothing to do other than sit there and like wait for someone to come through the site. So
especially 10 o'clock at night.
Especially 10 o'clock at night. So I needed to make the website be able to be as like self-sufficient as possible, so that I only got involved when it was like, oh, wait a minute, like this is worthy of your time and effort. And then, so if I'm getting that alert, that means, oh shoot, like this is actually a really legitimate, like good opportunity, and time is money. And if I can get to them and I can get them to book for that demo for the next day, I'm going to do it now, because it doesn't matter that it's 10 o'clock at night. For that individual, that's when that person has time. And so if they don't book with me, they're going to end up on someone else's site and they're going to book with someone else if they haven't already. So I look at that as being, did the website do the work? Well, no, I did the work originally, but I put that time into making sure the website could be that hardworking member of my team. And if you think about that, the website served as marketer and SDR, really like, and queued it up for me all in one. And it's not always that beautiful and clean, but that to me was like this was good that I spent the time to put into this. And your website should be working for you while you're sleeping, working for you while you're in flight on the plane. You should wake up the next morning and there should be forms filled out on your website, that are relevant to an experience. And then you dig in and you see, okay, what do we got here?
All right, we are off and running. My conversation with Jen Spencer, CEO of SmartBug Media. Listen, if you are an early stage company, obviously we're talking about sales, we're talking about marketing, we're talking about lead generation and content strategy. If you're an early stage company and you're looking to ramp up and you're looking for ways to fill the top of your sales funnel, if you're looking for a way to get those leads that you're generating through into your sales pipeline and help them become your next paying customer, chances are here at Sales Quality, we might be able to give you a hand. So that's all we do every single day is work with early stage tech companies. We help them to ramp up and scale their sales process. So if you want a little bit more about what we do, or you want to get some helpful hints and get some frameworks that you can work from, then I would encourage you to join one of our next live events that we're going to be running. If you just go to salesqualia.com, and on that homepage, you'll see a button that says live events. It'll give you a link to all of the upcoming live events, the trainings, the workshops, the webinars that we're going to be running. So it's one place to go while you're there. At salesqualia.com, you can download a copy of my best-selling book, Stop Hustling, Start Scaling, if you haven't already. That will also put you onto our email list so we can notify you of what's coming up in the next coming days, weeks, months, as we start to talk to you and have a conversation over email. And finally, if you just want to have a quick chat, if you just want to shoot me a note, Scott at salesqualia, sales, QUALIA.com. You can just type in the word chat into the subject line. Let me know. That'll just let me know, let my assistant know who picks up my email that you want to have a quick chat about your situation, give you some quick ideas, brainstorm a few ideas so you can start ramping up and scaling up your sales process. We can get that set up too. So head over to salesqualia.com or shoot me an email, Scott at salesqualia.com. And let's have a chat sometime soon. All right, that's it for now. Let's head back to my conversation with Jen and Spencer. That's a great story because, I mean, there's so much to that. Like one, that, like you said, the person that's there at 10 o'clock at night, they obviously care a lot about getting this, whatever it is that's ailing them, they want to get it fixed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be on a website at 10 o'clock at night chatting with a bot.
Yeah.
Right. First of all. And second of all, like I always think about when you have leads, you know, they're obviously, there's gradations. And I think some leads that come in, you know, maybe 5% on the front end, like no matter what you do, they're just going to go to your site and book a meeting. There's just like, I want help, or they've seen your stuff somewhere else and like, okay, I'm going to the site, booking a meeting. Then you have some that no matter what you do, they're just always going to be toe dippers and they're never going to book. Right. So I think the opportunity is like, how do you convert the ones in the middle? And that's one of those ones where maybe it could have gone the other way, but by virtue of the fact that you had this set up, you had some automation in the sense that you leveraged the content and expertise that got the person in. Then that one manual step, a human interaction, is what led to the demo. Whereas the other 8 websites that person had seen that day maybe only had bots or no bots or nothing. Fill out a form, we'll get back to you, never. And that's how you book the meeting. And I think that's a great example of the marketing sales hybrid for early stage, that it's not just marketing or it's not just sales, that you can use the marketing as leverage for your sales.
Exactly. Because like you said, that individual who's like, yeah, I hired an agency and it's been 3 months. Well, yeah, that sounds about right. Because that agency, whoever they are, I mean, they have to get onboarded to who you are as a company and what your goals are. And they have to dig into, well, what's worked in the past and what hasn't, and vertical research. And I mean, there are so many things that they have to do. So if you know that every dollar you spend in marketing today, you need to be able to see the return on that investment in the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever that number is. You need to know what those numbers are, right? And then, you have to be prepared to hustle a little bit. So,
yeah. And so from a content standpoint, I heard you talk about a little bit. Another interview you did was on the Pavilion podcast. And you mentioned about how to get content, how to develop content for marketing from sales. And so again, this is a place where I think you described how sales and marketing really do overlap in some sense. Because if we go back to that founder again, that's like, I'm just so busy. I don't have time to build content. I don't have time to do the marketing thing because I got to focus on sales or I got to focus on something else. I think you had a really great example of how marketing could use, and marketing could be the same person, founder, marketing and selling, but the activity of marketing, you talked a little bit about using sales as a way of finding content. If you don't mind just sharing a little bit more about that, because I think it'd be good for our audience to hear it.
Absolutely. So sales is a great place to get content for your website, for any kind of marketing effort, because it's one of the times where you actually have an end user, potential customer or a prospective customer interacting with you directly and answering questions and asking questions. The same can be said of someone that's engaging in like a customer with a customer success manager or a customer success rep. So those calls as well. So here's an example of like a layer out. So we have Slack, our team is, interacting with each other in Slack. We have a channel called, client examples. We have a channel that's marketing strategy, where people will come into that channel. Salespeople will come in and say, hey, I'm looking for an example of a time where we did this for that. What were the results? Like I'm trying to get some information, or, hey, has anyone ever heard of this, this particular piece of technology, or anyone used this? What a great place to do some social listening, because any place where you've got one of your customers or potential customers who are asking you questions, that's a potential piece of content. So the places I like to go hunting for content are places like sales call recordings or, customer review, QBR recordings. I also love to look at questions that people ask our chatbots. So all of the places and spaces where you have people from the outside giving you input, that's where I'll jump in and be like, this is like a blog basically writes itself, especially when you think about your usage of like collaboration tools like Slack. Sales rep comes in and says, hey, can our product do X, Y, Z? Product manager says, actually, it can't do Z, but it does X, Y, but there's a reason it can't do Z. It's because, and they ... and they explain the reason why. Our point of view as a company is we don't do that. Or maybe it's on our roadmap, whatever it is. That's like really, really powerful content, right? Because if you're getting that question from one prospect, likely that question is popping up in the minds of countless others, and you just may not know. So you can get ahead of the curve by publishing that as a blog, positioning it as frequently asked questions to let that person know they're in good company. Like other people who have their role are questioning these same things, or to help differentiate you from someone else. And if you're using a more robust call recording tool like Gong or like ZoomInfo's Chorus, or even inside of HubSpot's own new conversational intelligence platform, if you're using something like that, you can aggregate data so you can see what are the topics that are coming up most often. And then you can actually build your editorial calendar around that. I just find that if we're talking about a sub $1 million early stage company, that's probably going to be in Slack. It's probably going to be water cooler type of conversation, things that are sort of bubbling up, or maybe call reviews, maybe things that are coming up in sales meetings. So like just even sitting in on a weekly sales meeting, a weekly pipeline meeting can be a really great place for someone wearing that marketing hat to get ideas of what kind of content should be created to continue to attract additional prospects.
Yeah. And I love the idea of using questions from prospects. It reminded me of like years and years ago, I was in real estate technology. I was at a company called Altos, and this is in like 2007, 2008, when blogging was becoming a thing,
Yeah.
And agents they realized like, oh, if I blog on my local real estate market, it's a great way for SEO to pick up my stuff, because that's the way buyers are going to be looking for houses. But they would struggle with content. And I've heard multiple marketing people tell them in these workshops, like, hey, every day as an agent, you're probably getting questions from buyers that are coming in from out of town. They're like, yeah, of course. Well, what are the top 5 questions you get? Well, they ask about school districts. They ask about this. They go, each one of those is a blog post.
Yeah.
And guess what? You've already answered those questions in an email response back to those people. So just copy and paste the email. You could literally take it word for word and say, this is a question I got from an out-of-town buyer, and here was my email reply.
Exactly.
Voila, blog post. And
exactly.
Like, oh, yeah. So it could be the same thing with software integrations, like you're pointing around, like, why don't you integrate with XYZ platform? Because if you do that, then this happens or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
That's really cool.
And one other like kind of tip I have, maybe if you're really, really early and you don't even have that many conversations yet, you're really just kind of like planting your like flag in the ground of like, this is who we are, right? You can look at those competitors that you got that you're looking to overcome and look at what content they're producing and think, okay, can we answer this question better? Maybe we tackle that same topic, try to tackle it better. And if you can tackle it better through the eyes of Google, you'll rank higher than that competitor. And so that's
what would be considered, sorry to jump in, but like, what would be considered better? Or can you think of a specific example?
Like more thoroughly with more context, more examples. I don't want to get too far in the weeds of like creation of listicles and other kind of like SEO tactics, but because there's so much content that's out there, you could just start looking at, well, what's the content that's already there? And how do we put our own spin on it? How do we answer that question, but in maybe a more personal way to the individuals that we're targeting that we think would be a really good fit for our solution versus any other solution.
Got it.
So let's talk. We've been talking about early stage startups, and founders. So if we think about like what does a modern day organization need to solve their accounting problems or whatever other problem, you might take a piece of content like that and look at it through the lens of, how about when you're an early stage founder? And now what should be that person's perspective? How should that type of individual be thinking about these challenges? So that's just a way I would say make it, quote, better, is just make it more relevant to your audience.
Yeah. And that helps, of course, if you know your niche or your ICPs or your buyers' personas, which is something else another reason why a lot of times you outsource to marketing agencies, it doesn't work because you really haven't figured out who are you selling to. You mentioned something earlier, which I wrote down, which is you have to figure out, what do they mean for who? You said that companies need to figure out, what do they mean for who?
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that meant like, who exactly are you targeting and why do those people buy from you?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So then one last question before I let you get on your way. So let's just say that, okay, now we've turned that founder into a believer. They're going to do their own marketing for a while. Before they hire the agency, they get sales going. They break through the $1 million barrier. They get to Series A. You mentioned that a company should probably wait till the 3 to 5 million in revenue before they hire an agency in most cases. What would be like 2 or 3 signals that would indicate to a founder or early stage team, like, maybe now's the time we should start thinking about getting this off our plate, or we should hire an agency to help, accelerate or augment what we're already doing in-house?
I think the signals are, you've got some pipeline consistency. So, and the reason I say that is because if you're about to spend $10,000 or $15,000 a month with an agency, then you need to be prepared for, sometimes, like, marketing's an experiment and sometimes experiments fail. So not every campaign is going to be a success, or campaigns are going to be successful at varying degrees. So if you're putting all your eggs in that basket, that's a little bit scary, right? So you want to make sure things are a bit diversified. So you look at, all right, we're placing this bet, we're going to devote extra resources to this particular initiative because of what we've seen, how we've seen this part of the organization perform in the past. And we're going to try this for a 6-month period or a 12-month period. You need to be able to kind of support that. It doesn't mean that you have to be prepared to like let 12 months of that revenue all go. Like frankly, no one should be able to afford that, right? That we don't see that hardly ever. But you do need to be able to try things and some things will work really well and some other things won't. And it's a learning. So that's why I think about, well, what if you were to spend that month's retainer and you didn't close any business as a direct result of it? What would that do to your business? What would that do to your organization? And if the answer is, well, it would do like major damage to the company, then it's probably too soon, right?
Yeah,
so,
I see what you're saying. If you're too dependent on the outcome, then you're putting a lot of pressure on those dollars spent and ultimately on that agency. And you're saying like, yeah, we're doing $3 million in revenue, but maybe you still don't have a well-defined sales process.
Right.
Like maybe you really still haven't figured out outbound. Maybe you really still haven't figured out conferences. Maybe you haven't figured out whatever partnership channel, whatever that is. So that if you have 2 or 3 other channels working, then the investment of 10 or 15K is just going to help you augment, we call it a revenue acquisition portfolio, like diversifying your portfolio. Yeah. But if you're banking, I'm going to make this investment in this stock and hope that I'm going to be able to retire, that's probably pretty risky, know? So I like the idea of having the other engines working, which I guess would explain why 3 to 5 million would be a good benchmark. You're not going to get to 3 to 5 million just pure luck or hustle or grind. You're going to have at least one thing working pretty well to get there. So that the 10 or 15K would just then augment that as opposed to be the dependency on which you're going to grow.
Exactly. It's like, what are you going to fall back on? And, listen, I'm a huge believer in marketing and inbound marketing, and I've grown multiple organizations from out of nothing on inbound marketing, but I was also internal to that organization at that time. And I was on sales demos, and I was doing contract negotiations, and I was aware of every bug that was being worked on in every sprint, right? You're ingrained, you're involved, and it can work really, really beautifully. And an agency that I work with was supportive of but I was driving that strategy. So that, I think, it's that biggest piece is an agency can support you, could augment you, but who's driving the strategy internally? And you can't completely outsource that. We'll help with strategy, right? We'll jump in and say, all right, how does this fit into bigger picture goals? Let's figure out what the best strategy is going to be for this particular initiative. But at that early stage where you're talking about your go-to-market strategy for your whole company, your whole brand, that's something you want to kind of bubble wrap and keep pretty close.
Got it. Well, look, I know we want to get you out of here. You've got other things to do, especially running SmartBug Media and dealing with your team and customers and all those good things. So obviously, we'll put a link to smartbugmedia.com on the show notes. I've got your link to LinkedIn. You can find Jen at Jen Spencer on LinkedIn. Any other places that you'd like people to go? Where can they contact you? Anything that would be interesting that you'd like folks to go check out?
LinkedIn is really the best place where I'm most socially active. And just let me know that you heard me on this podcast if you connect with me, just so I have context and know how to kind of follow up with you all. But no, I think that's a great spot.
Okay. So appreciate your time and your partnership with us over the years. We still have people that watch the recording of your presentations from a few years ago, and we still refer people to the things that you taught back then. So thanks for all that you do. Awesome. And congrats on the move with SmartBug Media. And we'll have to do this again really soon.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
All right. See you soon. Bye. All right. That is a wrap. I really wish we had more time with Jen today. Looking forward to maybe doing a part 2 or part 3 at some point really, really soon. She's just really top of the game when it comes to thinking about your marketing, sales, and revenue operations, your revenue growth part of your business. So listen, if you made it to this part of the podcast, it tells me you're probably digging the content. So whether this is your first episode or maybe you're a multi-time listener, make sure you go ahead and click that subscribe button wherever you're listening to this podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or somewhere else, so that you can be notified around every single episode that we are posting. Secondly, make sure you leave a review. Tell us how we're doing. If you've got a particular idea for a topic or you've got some guests, tell us what we could do to make this podcast even better. Definitely want to hear from you. And then finally, make sure you tell a friend or 10. So if you listen to this podcast and you know an early stage founder that could benefit from this conversation that I just had with Jen Spencer, some ideas around marketing, around sales, around lead generation, then shoot them a note. Say, hey, I just listened to this episode. You should check out this podcast. Viral is still the very best way for us to get the word out about this podcast. Nothing jazzes us more than seeing the episodes downloads go up and up and up. So that's with your help. So got more episodes coming down the pike, more interviews already lined up on the calendar, along with other podcast episodes that I'm recording via LinkedIn Live. So if you missed them on LinkedIn Live over the coming weeks and months, we'll be republishing those recordings here on the podcast as well. So no shortage of ways to get good help, good information, and good tips from us when it comes to ramping up and scaling your sales process. So one more time, head over to salesqualia, QUALIA.com. You can either access the book that I've written, add yourself to your email list, or check out when we're going to have our next live event for you to join. And we'll take it from there. That's it for now. Thanks so much for listening to the Startup Selling Show, Talking Sales with Scott Sambucci, and we will catch you on the next episode. See ya.